Hi, and welcome to the I Teach Myself podcast. My name is Matthew Miniman, and this is episode 58. What can a bowl of candy teach us about logs? So, candy bowl, you're probably pretty familiar with it. Somebody has this bowl of candy on their desk. Let's say, you walk up and this bowl of candy is filled with M&Ms. Now, aside from the hygienic concerns here, you decide, screw it. I'm going to dive in. I'm going to eat some of those M&Ms. So you grab a handful, you start popping them in your mouth. And, you do what any sane person does and just, you shove a whole handful in there right off the bat. Chew and chew. And you realize something's off. Doesn't quite taste right. There's fruit in this. There's something wrong here. These aren't just M&Ms. These are M&Ms and Skittles mixed together. What kind of psycho does this? Anyway. So, you find as you've eaten this bowl of candy or eaten some of it that you have taken, that somebody has mixed both M&Ms and Skittles. And to top it all off, they've also thrown in, just for fucking fun, Reese's Pieces in there. And now you have this gigantic fuck stack of a bowl that you have to figure out how you're going to eat one by one. That's a pain in the ass. I'm an American. I want diabetes, and I want it now. I'm going to eat all that candy. Yeah. So this is how it is to look at logs. So one of the things that you find when you're looking at logs is there's a lot of them. When your computer generates logs, there are a ton. In fact, if you open up your Windows computer and you go into the event viewer and you just look at the number of logs, there are a ton. And that's not even the whole number of logs that you can possibly see. There are literally hundreds of thousands of logs generated a second on a normal machine, just through normal operations. And this information is generally telemetry data, and it's generally not useful for broad consumption, but it's important for these logs to occur. We need these logs. Logs help us identify problems. They help us troubleshoot the source of issues. They do a lot, and it's very important, specifically in the cybersecurity world, for logging to be a thing. And one of the things that it can be very difficult to understand with logs is that it can be really hard to understand what is good and what is bad by just looking at the base information that a log will give you. And what I mean by this is that all logs in just their normal state are generally they're generally neutral in tone. They don't have any data or any information that outright makes them malicious or bad or whatever. It is the surrounding information that you have to take. It's the context that you have to look at to understand exactly what's going on. Now, most logging systems or programs attempt to identify the criticality of a log, going from information all the way to critical, but these may or may not be useful as well. Microsoft is known very much to attach critical import to logs that don't matter. They just don't fucking matter. And the only reason that they are critical is because of the type of log that they are. So, when you are looking at logs, you can get that mixture of, hey, this is good, this is bad, in there very easily without understanding or having any additional contextual information. So what does this mean? What does this mean for us as people, as, IT professionals, as business owners, as anybody who operates a machine? What does this mean? Well, there's a lot. that we can do with this information, and a lot that we can do to assist in making sure that this information is readable and or useful. So one of the things that we attempt to do with logs is we attempt to aggregate them, because if you have more than one computer, you have more than one logging source. And if you don't have anything to help you pull all those logs together, you're going from one computer to the other, and it can be very time consuming. Just like if you have this bowl of candy that somebody has thrown both M&Ms and Skittles into, it's going to take a while for you to eat it, because you're going to have to eat everything one by one. Because unless you're just an absolute complete psycho, you're going to want to eat. You're not going to want to eat Skittles and M&Ms together. I can't. M&Ms and Reese's Pieces, that's probably okay, but M&Ms and Skittles, oh man, that's. I just have a problem understanding that. I can't. I just can't. What is it with you people? Anyway. With logs, with a log aggregation system, you pulling in your logs together, you're able to at least bring them into a central source where you can sift through them. And generally, if you have a log aggregation system, this log aggregation system has some sort of way to visualize them and search through the logs. And this can be very quick. And this is kind of the basis of what a SIM is. SIM meaning system information and event management. And with most logs or most SIMs, what you're looking at is a platform that not only aggregates your logs together, but gives you additional context around them. And this is what we call enrichment. And most SIMs provide some additional enrichment. It's actually kind of the secret sauce of the SIM that I have created through my business or through the business I work for, RainTech. The SIM that I have created provides a tremendous amount of context around each and every log. It attempts to do some correlation with event IDs and things like that, so that you can see an event basically from cause to result to action entirely within the SIM. And this is something that is important to know and understand when you're looking at the data to attempt to troubleshoot, and in the reality of threat hunting, to understand what may or may not be malicious. So in this whole scheme, what you're doing with the enrichment is you are, again, adding additional context, but it's more than just that. You are making more of a whole, or making more of a single log than really what it originally could be. You are adding logs together because the parts will be greater than the sum, because you're grabbing additional data. Because, for instance, with certain logs, you may get IP address information. With other logs, you don't get that information. And the only way to correlate the two is or the only way to make the two logs useful together is to add them together. This happens a lot because connection logs are a thing, and then activity logs are another thing. And so you need to be able to have these logs kind of correlate in order for your understanding of the situation from the system to mean anything. And this can seem daunting because, like this fuck stack of a candy bowl that you have, this candy bowl could be just gigantic. If you have a candy bowl that is like that, you've got 5 pounds of candy in this candy bowl where somebody's mixed all of these different candies together, man, it's going to be pretty psychotic. And the candy bowl, the candy bowl metaphor or whatever that I've listed here, it kind of breaks down with logs, because logs, it's more than just a few pieces or a few different types of candy mixed together. You're talking with full system logs being ingested into a SIM. You're talking probably thousands of different types of logs. It's like if you mixed every kind of candy together in a candy bowl and then had millions of candies in that candy bowl and then asked somebody to make sure that they pulled only the M&Ms out of that bowl. That's kind of what it would be like. To kind of drive this point home another way, one of the things that we run into a lot with our security platform is we are asked or tasked with investigating and understanding Microsoft 365. We ingest all Microsoft 365 logs, and we do this in order to monitor and identify any potentially malicious or compromised account. And so one of the ways we do that is we look at information regarding the activity of the account. We have some anomalous detection, and we do a lot of other very unique tasks when ingesting these logs, IP enrichment, data enrichment, things like that. But one of the things that makes it really difficult and is a kind of a key point here with this candy metaphor is that when you as a person are operating on a normal network, let's say you have Verizon as a wireless provider, those Verizon IP addresses are identified very distinctly. I can look at IP addresses and be like, yes, Verizon. And that makes it very simple for me to identify. However, if you use a consumer VPN, what you're doing all of a sudden is you're coming out of the same backplane, out of the same backend systems as malicious attackers, because they're using consumer VPNs just like everybody else to hide their location. And so when you use this, all of a sudden you start coming from Chicago when you were coming from Dallas, and all of a sudden your IP address information also now reads IPXO.com, which makes me panic. I freak the fuck out because you don't come from Chicago ever. And now all of a sudden you are coming from an organization that I have never heard of. You don't have any agreement with. You haven't told me that this is a valid organization. And you, as a consumer, probably have no idea who IPXO is. So what am I to do? I lock you the fuck out as a security professional, because I'd rather lock you out than a compromise continue to occur. And this is the challenge when you start working from a consumer VPN to work on your organization's Microsoft 365 accounts. You are essentially dumping in Skittles into a bowl of M&Ms, because now I have to fucking guess which one is you and which one could be an attacker. And I have to be right every fucking time, or else you get compromised and your data gets lost. And this is a problem. So, with this additional type of information, it is not a flawless, even with enrichment and data aggregation and anomalous detection and things like that. The point I'm trying to make is that it's not foolproof. You can't simply pull out all of the errors that are going to occur in your logging information. So what you want to do is you want to also present your logs in such a way that the information is known. You want to try to separate them and isolate them away from each other so that you have your known quantities there. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. One of the ways is by policy, and by enforcement, is to say we don't use consumer VPNs. That would solve the particular instance that we had. But there are other things that you can do to ensure that your logs remain separate and equal, making sure you have separate logging platforms, or not necessarily logging platforms, but you have separate log aggregation identifiers for the different types of logs that you're ingesting. What I mean by this is if you have a application where you have custom logs coming in, you want those logs identified differently than logs that are coming from Windows, so that by at a glance we can identify what those mean. We know that this bowl is M&Ms and we know this bowl is Reese's Pieces. We know this. And you also want to identify your data based on who and how the information got to you. There's a lot of different ways to do this. Microsoft attempts to do this in some small part by identifying certain logs certain ways. So, for instance, in Microsoft 365, they have two separate logging platforms. It's hard to call it different platforms. Anyway, Microsoft has an interactive and non-interactive logging platform, and they identify such in the logs that they feed you. And so if you're able to identify non-interactive logins, you can be like, oh, okay, well, this is a system that was previously signed in, and these logs mean one thing, while these interactive logs mean another thing. And so what you can do with that information is you can be like, okay, the interactive logs are what we're interested in for identifying these particular things. This is where the malicious activity is going to primarily come from. This is what this is going to do. This is what this is going to do. For the non-interactive logs, we want to identify when information is being exfiltrated using these automated tasks, and we can identify it using these kind of key pieces of information. And you can build your structure. You can build and structure your a rule set to identify the information and kind of readily respond to events based on the type of information that's being fed in the specific ways that it's getting to you. And you can create these rules and playbooks and runbooks and automations based on this information. And this is where you get into a full and complete solution that is sorting your candy for you, because this fucking madman keeps throwing his candy into the same goddamn bucket all the time. Ah, God, I'm sorry. I'm never going to forget that. Just eating a mouthful of Skittles and M&Ms together and not having a good time. And it's not like I'm going to spit it out. I'm going to eat the whole thing. Why? Because it's candy. Anyways, that, I think, completes the coverage of that subject. I hope you guys have a great day.